Of the Unearthing of the Stolen Brilliance of Zoo by Blair MacKenzie Blake. Earth splitting, sun gleaming on the clinking of pickaxes. Burnous Arabs like wraiths in the platinum rayed glare. Noisy progress as layers of time are unearthed under the watchful eye of a vulture circling the trenches. Tables of potsherds, chaff and bones, speckled with flies, remains of glazed colors in the lingering dust. Painted bricks strewn about the mysterious flat mounds of once mighty terraced towers that reached the sapphire heavens, now blanched with age in the scorched vastness. Dusty precincts girdled by fences of bleached camel thorn. An archaeologist in his tent, wreathed in bluish pipe smoke, perspiring in khaki and drab, dipping into tins of delicacies washed down with the velvet sting of cognac, while cataloging sun-baked shards of a puzzling wedge-shaped script, clay fragments which bring to light the cradle of civilization, lost cities beneath drifts of sparkling sand. Working feverishly to meet the rush for antiquities by foreign museums under the suspicious eye of swarthy turbaned officials, dealers in the flourishing black market trade, curios sold in tortuously twisted alleys of lantern-lit Baghdad bazaars. A cacophony of voices and the tuneless piping of reeds as flame patterns dance on carpets of glittering fantasy. Vivid languor rent by the commotion of diggers, amulets of quartz flashing in the sun's blinding streaks, parched throats muttering protective incantations against the ill omen from brittle, tattered leaves of sheepskin scrawled with myrrh ink. Artifact disinterred from a pit where it slumbered for millennia. Grim aura dusted with a sable brush, revealing a canine face with a gaping mouth. Figurine of a bird-taloned monster with corroded wings outspread, king of evil spirits of the air, Pazazu, lord of the wind demons. Warding off evil with their variegated stones secreted in cloths, bulging obsidian eyes casting a deathly glance. Peasants fleeing from the ancient relic with its curse graven in a dead tongue. For all those who crawl like beetles amongst the potter's clay and soiled sackcloth, feeding on the dust of this gloom-wrapped nether, sky growing dark over the desolate plain, crimson sea of sand rising on the horizon like a distant swarm of locusts, spreading rapidly over the pitiless wastes till the flaming sun is vanished, clouds of demons moving with the rustling of great wings. Muffled shouts obscured by the opaque curtain, reed huts and scaffolds tossed in the shrill flurries, wreaking havoc on the encampment, pelted by swirls of debris as husks of dragonflies rain down upon the ripples of red eternity. Dusky yellow moon, bathing the ruins of the ziggurat mounds, with nomads' campfires atwinkle in the desert twilight. Indistinct shapes wheeling above the faintly shadowed brickwork, alighting upon the doleful shades of the season's diggings. Birds scurrying across the stratum littered with dust-laden secrets, exquisitely painted jars and earthenware with carbonized smudges, entombed by the beast of wind-borne sand. Stifling breeze blowing the horrid perfume of carrion, glimmer of excavated statuary in crepuscular beams. Magus with granite-hard features and a shaven domed pate, seated in a pan-tangled magic circle drawn on the scorpion-infested ground. Atame in its gilded sheath, reflecting the quivering candles, licking tongues of flame, catching his robe's ample black draping. The occultist, in full ceremonial regalia, gazing deeply into a Babylonian gem, building up visions in the depth of the shoe stone. Ears ringing with cicadas, and the camel's symphony of old brass bells, seer intoning the formula which opens the gates of the abyss. Mauve shades haunted by screech owl and jackal, baleful hunters of the night banished by the purity of he of the middle pillar. Washed in moonlight, shadows flitting about the forgotten splendor, ghostly shapes summoned from their coldly splendid palaces beneath. Shifts of color, acquiring definition in the heart of the sphere, vividly bright constructions of the magician focusing his concentration, steadying a lintel's reliefs as a reference point in the eternal spectrum, till standing before a richly ornamented portal guarded by huge winged lions, lamp flames ablaze in their faceted eyes as the ring bolts are unlocked. Parquetry of floor and marvelous decorated walls, gilded cedar wood bordering double doors of hammered metal, opened on mysterious, opulent vistas veiled in sun glare. Shimmering, haughty palaces with turrets against the unclouded azure, paradises of tiger and ringdove shaded by softly swaying palms. Luxurious hanging gardens reflected in water struck by the sparkling sun, umbrage of pavilions ornamented with trellising of gold. Mosaics in waves of heat haze passed by camel and brightly dyed throngs on dust-choked metropolitan streets. Litters passing under tall bronze portals, Sarush dragons on obelisks gazing down upon the wanton luxury. Fanciful zigzags in astragal sheathing the walls of a luscious harem. Sultan reclined on damask, surrounded by idolatrous splendor, glutted on the richness of figs and honey, fed to his majesty by bejeweled olive fingers. Temple courtesans in flowing diaphanous veils, dancing with perfumed scarving to the rattle of timbrel. Night's purple cloak as the citadel of Babylon blazes in splendor, thumping of drums shaking the glittering vault of the sky. Snorts of a great bull sprinkled with glazed bowls of lustral water, followed by the knife thrusts of a stargazer. Bull, the guilty zoo are you. Blood sacrifice to atone for evil plottings in the distant past. Ritually slaughtered animals staining the temple courtyard's bricks, spilled entrails fuming in a widening puddle under the silvery moon, like the mask of Huwawa, son of Pazazu, whose breath is death. Specks of the arterial spray obscuring the sky's stone, gut pile torched, in a purification by burning, as the seer clears the blood-stained crystal, once again plumbing its vast depths with a steady gaze. Shrouded figure in the crowd signaling with a cryptic gesture, leading the magician from the ornate friezes of the temple complex. Proxies of polished diorite gazing at the brilliant skies, moving through the avenue's throngs as passers-by avoid dangerous glances. Magic charms scattered on rugs in the marketplace where brightly mottled snakes dance to wooden flutes in the pallid lamplight. Storytellers enthralling audiences over the jangle of horses' bridles. Moving from the street marvels, eyes travel down a back alley when an Arab steps from the shadows, flashing a daggered smile. Piquant fumes of hashish and prisms of cut glass bottles, arabesques of the wall decoration in the flickering of tarnished brass lamps, wan faces sucking ivory-tipped hoses and twining hookahs, seated on cushions around trestled tables and spirals of intoxicating smoke. Glint of scimitar hanging from obscurely menacing figures, exchanging furtive glances in the half-light of the den's soporific facade. Password given to a figure who answers with a counter-signal, lifting a sequin tapestry that conceals a secret passageway. Recognition signals shown while moving through a dark passageway, vapors of narcotic resin mingling with drifts of bespiced braziers, ushered into the resplendent hall of a magnificent inner temple, brazen tripods of burning aromatics on matting and sheepskin rugs, walls bedizened with diapered hangings and talismans engraved upon the seals. Emblems of the mystical fraternity with their majestic beards of indigo, magi in long pleated robes of vivid embroidery and turquoise mitres, offering hospitality for he who seeks admission to their path. Sashed, purple-edged royal magicians' gowns appearing in the sphere itself, the jewel once set in a phantom caliph's fallen crown, formed of solidified secretions of the silver fire of 1,000 Arabian moons, precious stone of His Majesty of the Order of the Black Peacock. Peeking through the glister of beads into the inner sanctum, sweet arpeggios of harp strummed from behind filigreed screens. A woman of remarkable beauty in the diffused amber light, rising from the luxurious comfort of silken cushions, sultry night purling flesh girdled with a pubic ornament, sprinkling her nakedness from a gilded basin of rose water. Torques gleaming with gold fire, as are her bracelets' prismatic beams, while painting lids with kohl to enhance the glamour of almond-shaped eyes, irises of fading violet blue that once cast the spell of Eridu. Bearded magi kings, in the glow of blazing olive oil lamps, voices of the wise men, conceding the deficiency of the jeweled strain, with the poverty of royal blood swallowed into the ground, the pure lunar essence once transmitted by a dynasty of priestesses, having weakened over generations of kingly succession, now shown a powdery substance of shining metal, held in the purple gloves of a priestly figure apparelled in a robe of harlequin, an ingestible substitute for the richer prize of ancient custom, when those bred for kingship were fed from a chalice of menstrual nectar, nourished with blood-red gold collected from the temple of the mother. The potent elixir to be replaced by this iridized white powder, baked into the bread of paradise with the ruling of mystic fire. Secret of the divine process, now in the reach of mortal men, attainable, the crown of perfection, opposed by the watchers of the throne, the sustenance of the kingly line bred in the house of Shimti, whose ladder of stone that reached to the heavens they frustrated, causing a great confusion of tongues, as people were scattered abroad after the grand assembly of gods abandoned Sumer, like flocks of migrating birds. His Majesty's precious stuffs, ablaze under walls of collapsing mortar, sending great clouds of dust where the mighty Tower of Babel has fallen. Fighting drowsiness as the shoestone fills with misty indistinctness, eyelids heavy from draughts of sweet wine laced with sleeping drugs. Seeker of illumination, wandering amid the fetor of dirt and bitumen, through a labyrinth of sepulchral urns in the darkness of a vaulted chamber. Eyes adjusting to the glittering plunder against the limestone walls, while wading amongst the morbid gleam of the death pit treasure. Parasol of dingy ostrich plumage, and a begilt spindle inlaid with lapis. Haunted by a face's ghastly beauty, violet eyes of mussel shell gnawed by worms, her gold-decked torso on its funeral bier swagged with a cloak of tar and pitch. Fragility of queening tresses adorned with a tinselled headdress, jewel-dripping corpse laden with glamour. Her maidservant's skeletal remains littering the royal grave, as do the bones of silver-collared oxen pulling carts of rotting green. Exiting the grave shaft to a dirge of choir and muffled drum, passing the jingling of gaily caparisoned horses pulling sledge chariots with tassels and streamers, drivers leading the ghostly procession down the sloping ramp with attendants bearing the wardrobe chests of their royal master. Singing courtiers, clothed in linen, carrying bronze drinking cups, taking their places on woven mats at the bottom of the tomb chamber, ladling poison from a metal cauldron as fingers pluck a lute, till silenced by layers of earth, the floor of their funeral feast. Glaring stretches dimmed, with a pulsating insect shrill, scryer's stone inhaled with a dull iridescence of a brackish marsh, wild cattle lowing in moonlight, reflected on the flood meadow, nakedness of brutes squinting at distant parapets, baggage trains in the festal glow enveloping a galaxy of tents, camels grunting in the delirious festival as decorated gates are shattered, revealing palaces with ivory-gilt domes flickering like mirages, ornamental pavement with stalls lamping on bedizened awnings, reek of leeks and onions on coals of braziers, aromatic puffs of censers on poles moving through the mephitic crush, dwarfed by the colossality of the ziggurat, while mounting its great staircase, carrying offerings to the platform temple under the heavenly vault. Stepped temple tower reaching to night's gorgeous arc, viewed by fish-garbed priests through polished crystal discs. Milky nebulosity disrupted by a fantastic, spreading void, winged gate of the starry abyss opening with a twisting, shifting vortex. Highway of an astral kingdom stretching across the dark unknown, hurtling dislodged stars with grand showers like mighty firebrands thrown. Brilliant, sparkling trains gloriously ablaze with dusky greenish trails, stupefying those watching the spectacle from the terraces of temples. Clouds flashing with light storms, massing into a floating construct, silent immensity, passing across the moon's borrowed clarity, darkening the gilding of temple roofs and the golden cupolas of palaces. Phantom mass approaching, casting further, ominous shadows upon the luster of chariots drawn by braying asses in the crowded alleys of the city quarter. Copper-helmeted soldiers pressed against the ramparts' painted panels, drifting with the crowds in the tumult, watched by giant basalt lions. Hulking, mysterious ship, anchored above the terraced mass like a vast blackened bird, dimly gigantic against the twinkling stretch, blotting out the firmament of stars, whose bright sprinkling defined its borders, raptured expressions in the stationary glory of the handiwork of Anu. Towering gateway ablaze with fiery beacons of the reception party, ritually visited by the Anunnaki from across the resplendent ocean, visits heralded by the celestial hysteria observed in the magic glass. Wielder of a lion-headed scepter, presiding from his sapphire throne, flanked by priests dressed in long pleated robes with dorsal fins like the Apkallu from the city of fish. Diviners studying entrails arranged on gem-encrusted platters. Docility of leopards crouched at the sandaled feet of the Sumerian queen, amused by the variegated faces of a troupe of dwarf clowns. offering tables of a great banquet in wafts of purifying tamarisk, roasted meat on brass, and lapis lazuli bowls of cream, jet eyes of a slaughtered menagerie sprawled on blood-moistened sawdust, wine of sweet dates and glazed ewers adorned with gilded straws. Mitred priests bowed in adoration while receiving command visions, star-arced portals of the gods mysteriously opening with a lurid glare. Slaves of the priest-king bearing gifts of bdellium and onyx, pudgy blue face of his majesty with the sign of the stars in his flesh, ushered before the throne base of Ninurta with its lifting radiance, scribe with reed stylus recording the scene in spellbound silence, as those chosen for the divine encounter vanish from the lofty platform in a rush of brilliance. Royal delegation transported in beams of iridescent ecstasy, crossing into a wondrous dream matrix, unfolding with a paralyzing tingle, kneeling envoy making grand gestures from the hall's luminous floor in a sanctuary of futuristic chalk white with a fantastic maze of effulgent corridors. Vague silhouettes undulating against the contour of the scintillant walls, gleaming being forms eclipsing the nobility of Ur with such terrifying beauty that the secret of Zu's true ancestry is obscured by masks of pity. Before the splendid mirror is veiled by the clouded eyes of the gazer. Pastel shades of the Euphrates without reed huts along its banks, bleak lavender dunes passed over by the winging of falcon and sparrow, sheep grazing in purple shadows without the regal dogs of shepherds, as stout, shaggy-haired figures drink with gazelle from sunset-tinged puddles. Marshy plains at twilight, devoid of painted barges punted in the gloom, strange brilliance in parallel strips, dotting the fertile crescent's expanse, seen through scattering orange-tinged clouds, reflecting a mirage's overpowering glare. Imposing complex of domed foliage, like that of an enclosed garden, flourishing oasis of acacia and date palm, bearing fruit within. Moon-dappled orchards gemmed with apples, plucked by a reaching hand, the flushed barrenness of a man watched from the buckthorn and bramble by the omniscient, inscrutable majesty of cherubim's topaz eyes. Figure of mysterious design, strolling amid densely growing willows, watching the nocturnal ballet of celestial steeds, yelps of lions growing more distinct outside the gates of paradise, distended abdomen of silver carrying within it the germ of humankind, man flesh wrapped in the protective aura of the birth goddess, fashioned embryo implanted in the garden of the celestial womb, creature of earth dust, to be elevated with royal obligations with the cutting of the umbilical cord at the moment of being brought forth. Gold aureoled with jewel work, a prized sapphire, fallen to dirt, the exalted tiara of Enlil, usurped with a sword of brilliant crystal, his throne smote with missiles proudly hurled by the rebel Zu, crowning himself with princely status while girt with dreaded brilliance. He who knows, leading the mutineers with their fear-inspiring splendor, having stolen the tables of scientific law from a copper tablet box, dialing in a sunburst of horror, whose direful thunder shakes the steps, raining feathers of birds on blackened pebbles of the scorched plain as niveous lambs bleat in anguish, their mouths foaming with blood. Divine blackbird piloted by the adversary god Ninurta, mobilizing angels with flaming stones to crush the diademed skull of Zu and return the tablets of destiny from his cedar perfumed mountain. panels with an intricate complexity of mechanized, spiraling reds. Ijiji, viewing leagues of stars from their perch, supreme orbiters of an endless track in the timeless glittering of the heavens, circling a bluish globe swirled with aqueous clouds, nestled like a gem in the cosmos. Lattice of vivid coloration reflected on a transparent domed helmet. The orphan zoo planning a great rebellion to free the gods of their toil, seizing the crown of sovereignty with weapons of killing brightness, and fashioning a worker to bear the yoke. Ninursak's painless labor in the creation chamber of Eden. Seer placing the Babylonian gem in a wrapping of black silk, meditating upon the panorama of time, reflected in its polished depths. A rebel who waged war with Enlil that led to the creation of man, molded from the clay of earth and the blood of a slain god. The rich fluorescence of civilization they hoped to extinguish with the deluge, but for a boat on the teardrops of Enki, who to his beloved sons sent a dove, sacred virgins bedecked in scarlet, harlots with goblets of starfire, and magi who turn gold into bread, their wine spiced with exotic magic, under skies radiating a fascination which man will try to reach. Magus in more mundane attire, passing women in mourning sable, grieving the burnous corpses of husbands who perished in a tempest of blinding sand, as an ancient relic is interred. Pazazu, feared for evil plottings in the past.